Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cup Reviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I am your host, Marketing Manager Mackenzie, and once again, I am joined today by our OG review panel. We started all the way back in episode 1 with King Lear, and now we're here at kind of the tail end of our Stratford reviews with the OG panel once again. And today, we are talking about the 2010 production of The Tempest, featuring the wonderful stage and screen actor Christopher Plummer. That's right, Captain Von Trapp himself. Got shipped off to an island, and we got to see his adventures there. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful production. Directed by Des McAnuff as well, the former artistic director of Stratford before Anthony Cimolino took the reins. Yeah, we're going to talk all about this production, because we've already kind of talked about the play with our 2018 production with Martha Henry, but now it's time to discuss another version, because that's what Shakespeare's great at. He's a 400-year-old playwright who gets this continual renewal of production, so we get to talk about this particular interpretation, so we're going to have some fun with this. Joining me today is our production manager, Edmund Clark. Hello, Ed.
Hello, Mac. Hello, Ryan, Jill. Last time you guys saw me, I was donning a beard, a much bigger beard, and this is not going to last much longer, I promise. But thank you. I'm so happy to be back over here.
Excellent. Yeah, what was the last episode you were on? It was
It was Timon, I think.
Yeah, it was Timon of Athens.
Yeah, it was Timon of Athens.
Yeah, I was at my grandmother's.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. A lot has happened since.
Yes.
A lot of great things.
Good. And next we have our lovely General Assistant of Cup of Hemlock, Ms. Jillian Robinson. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Mac. How are you?
What is in your cup and what is in your ensemble? Because
and then go back and ask Ed what's in his cup.
We have to ask
yeah.
We'll turn back to Ed. Ed, what's in your cup first?
Yes. So I have in my Savannah mug.
Ooh.
I don't know if I probably said this. I usually drone on about it whenever people ask or don't. I'm from the States. I'm a Canadian and a U.S. citizen, so I'm from Georgia, and this is my Savannah mug. I don't know if it'll show up properly.
Yeah, we can see it.
But I have coffee in my mug.
Very good.
Lovely.
Very good.
Awesome.
And Jill, for you, what's your ensemble and what is in your cup?
Yeah, today I am donning, it's kind of like a shirt bathing suit cover-up kind of thing, but it's kind of to go on par with the ragged makeup that Miranda kind of dons in this production. And my earrings reminded me of little waves, which also gave me Tempest vibes. So that's what's happening here. And then in my cup today, I am actually getting over a headache storm tempest of myself. I had a terrible migraine yesterday, so I am drinking water. And today, water just seems so appropriate with what we're talking about. But because this production deals with a lot of magical elements, I'm drinking out of one of those frozen mugs that have like the water inside and then it's frozen. And I'm drinking sparkling water because, I had to make it a little bit magical.
Extra.
Oh, yeah, right. And I have regular water too, but I had to come to play however I can. So cheers.
Very good. And we have our wonderful literary manager, Mr. Ryan Borochovitz. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Mac. Always a pleasure to be back on the show.
Yes. What's your ensemble? And
well, I actually do have an interesting ensemble because I always feel bad. Jill brings her A game, and I'm like, I'm wearing a shirt. But like, I don't know if you can see because of my terrible video quality and the lighting in my room, but there's like a little wave pattern on my shirt. So similar to Jill's earrings, the Tempest is flowing through me.
Wow.
Very good.
And in my mug, I have just like boring old orange Pico tea, my usual go-to, but the mug itself is kind of on theme, sort of. I don't know if you can really see it. This is a custom printed mug with a quote from, I may have mentioned once or twice, Tolstoy is my favorite author. But Christopher Plummer played Tolstoy in a not too terrible, pretty half-decent biopic, The Last Station. And so I thought it was appropriate to use my Tolstoy mug to talk about Christopher Plummer in a completely different role.
Well done. Well done, Ryan. I like that effort today. You're
I
on
try.
your game.
We're capping off the Stratford series. I wanted to bring my A game.
It's true. And I am drinking water from my classic silver tankard mug, and I have another. I've never showed all my cool little Shakespeare things that I keep on my desk. So as I said, I always have my Shakespeare pocket watch that keeps our time. Then I also have my Shakespeare head eraser. He always sits right there on the desk. And then I have my Shakespeare bookend that sits there. And on the back, it talks about the works from a certain time period. So on the back here, I have Shakespeare's works 1564 to 1616. And on the back, it says Merchant of Venice, Hamlet, Much Ado, Macbeth, Othello, Taming of the Shrew, etc., etc., etc.
Is this where all your Amazon purchases are going towards?
Yeah.
No, actually, I got this paperweight when I cleaned out a theater storage locker.
Oh, cool.
As a summer gig, I have my ring that I wear all the time, my silver ring. Then I also have this. These are the two items that I got to take out of stores. They were like, yeah, you can have those. That is no problem. So those are the two items that I have. But yeah, Shakespeare's always been on my desk. But I thought this was the last great time I could kind of be like, see, I have a big giant Shakespeare stuff all over the place in here. There we go. Oh, and also I'm wearing purple in honor of Christopher Plummer in his purple faded tunic that he got to wear throughout the show. So
Nice.
yeah, there is purple all inlaid throughout my suit jacket and in the shirt. So purple is the color of the day. But why don't we kind of dive right into this production? Because, yeah, we've got a lot to talk about.
Dive in.
Just like that opening shot of Ariel diving in, which I have to say, having seen the production live, watching Juliana do that dive from 30 feet above the stage in the giant the lighting grid all the way down to the front, and having her talk about how every night she had to stand on the edge there and wait for the jump. And she just went, and it's one of the most exhilarating and the most terrifying things you'll ever do is you have to sit up there for basically the last 20 minutes before the lights go down, and you just have to look down at this this abyss you're about to jump into.
Wow.
So it's a great opening to this version. But either way, so who do we think was the best performed character? Ed, as this is your long-awaited return, why don't you give us our start with this?
So as I've said, I think in the last few episodes that I did, I spent 12 years performing in theater and the last 4 years in classical training, in intensive classical training. So I have to give it to Christopher Plummer. If anybody says otherwise, then that's an argument that I'm looking very forward to having. But no, I have to give it to Christopher Plummer. He has such a tempered performance, and one with such ease, and how he moves across the stage. It's very efficient. How he speaks is very thought-provoking, and just the timing of everything is it's great. It's great. I would say Christopher Plummer for my choice.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, we'll talk more about his particular Prospero because we do have a question that lets us kind of lead in there. But I will agree, Christopher Plummer was a fantastic Prospero for this production. I mean, Ryan, as you said when we talked about King Lear all the way back in episode 1, you kind of have to talk about the lead guy because it's like his play.
Yeah, so, I like how in the whole lead up to us planning and filming this episode, we kept referring to Plummer Tempest, Plummer Tempest, Plummer Tempest. Like we didn't say we didn't say Des McAnuff's Tempest. We didn't say the 2010 Tempest. No, this is the Plummer Tempest, and obviously he crushed it. And
he made that role his own for sure.
Yeah,
it was memorable.
Ryan.
Well, I was going to preamble about, how can you not praise, but I knew if I didn't go first, someone else would bring him up, so I do have backups. Yeah. And the main one I do want to kind of point out to is Juliana as Ariel, because she's just delightful in this, and, so something that, she's just having a good time, I think, is, the big takeaway of her performance. One of my favorite moments in this entire thing actually wasn't a Plummer moment, it was a her moment. When Ariel or like, yes, right after, I'm trying to think of which moment it was, but Ariel pops out of the trunk and is just like, here I am, and just like giggles.
Yes.
And she's just like, I know we'll save the comparisons to the other production for later, but like the Ariel in that one, while also one of the great highlights of the performance, Andre Morin, I think, who played Ariel.
Yeah, it's Andre Morin,
Yeah. Well, also a great highlight of the performance, that Ariel, I felt like was taken just a little too seriously, which I think is like, and like that's an interpretation, and I don't like fault the directing or the acting for that, and I think there is room for that, but I like that this Ariel is just bouncing around, kind of being this puckish sort of disturber of like, you know, not taking anything too seriously, having a good time. But then there is the one serious moment that I thought was handled very well in this production when Prospero was reminding Ariel of being trapped in the cloven pine by the witch Sycorax. And whereas with Martha Henry and Andre Morin in the previous one, that was like, I am taunting you because you owe me this life debt. Like, Juliana and Plummer, like the two of them had this like very intense, just like, let me remind you. And Juliana was just like frozen, like there was like a little projection on her face, so she's having these like PTSD flashbacks about it. And from that moment on, it is never questioned why she serves Prospero, because yes, I do owe him this, and life was so much worse. We don't have to actually grapple with this moral gray area of how do we feel about this indentured servitude. And while it might be like, it's certainly a valid interpretation for productions to grapple with that, I liked the way she handled the character, in which we never really had to question it because it just kind of made sense.
But yeah, no, I love that moment because she's downstage center and Prospero's kind of upstage of her. But you can really see the color and the joy drain out of her face when he's doing that description. Like, it's a beautiful actor transition moment where you see this totally different side of Ariel come out.
A lot of the moments that her and Plummer have are quite like, I think they're very like wonderful scenes together. Like, they really do play off of each other pretty well. I guess the contrast between him, because they're both slaves, her and Caliban. So like the contrast between her and how he treats Caliban, it's very like that oscillation is quite well done.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And like they clearly have a history together is like what you see in these moments. It's not just like, oh, I'm here because it's scene one and now what are we up to? Like, I legitimately believe that Christopher Plummer is friends with her in real life. Like, even if, but no, I just mean like,
end.
Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just like hang out outside of the stage. Like, just the relationship between the two of them just like worked, and that's why, even though she is technically his slave, like I don't disagree with the fact that she's laughing and having a good time, because like there is like a real connection there.
Yeah. Agreed. Jill.
Yeah, well, speaking of real connections and everything, the one thing that was so interesting about this piece, because to be honest, I feel like every actor really hit the mark with their character choices and the way they were carrying the text and the physicality they all chose. And it's interesting, we're reviewing this 2010 production, because I think the past Shakespeare productions we've done have kind of been within the same kind of years. So we sort of became very aware of like the camaraderie of these casts. Like we saw the Graham Abbeys, the Michael Blakes, like, you know, that everyone's the David Collins, like they're all working together there. And it's neat watching this 2010 production, because you can tell this company has that exact same chemistry. We just haven't been able to watch a lot of Shakespeare's that happened from like early 2000s to 2012, like so that was really neat to right off the bat know, like, okay, yeah, like we're saying, like these actors all know each other really well, they work well together, and compare and contrast each other beautifully. So I actually didn't have Plummer as like my top, not because like I thought he was the top, but I thought there was an obvious. No, it was an obvious. Like, it's like, I don't think we need to. I do think I want to bring attention to.
And it's obvious.
Three members that really stood out to me. So Caliban, because, okay, so I had the opportunity of seeing Dion as Othello in the 2012 production, I believe, 2012, 2013.
Yeah, 2013, I think.
Right. And I forgot how much, like, I am mesmerized by his voice. Like, his diction and grasp of text, and then paired with the physicality he did with this Caliban, was stunning. And I was like, yes, that is why I was so entranced by him. And once again, it was just so beautifully done. And then just kind of talking back to having this space where clearly these actors are all very comfortable with each other, and with that comfort kind of comes the pushing of traditional, like, Shakespearean boundaries. The physicality that Trish Lindstrom as our Miranda and Bruce Dow as our Trinculo, I need to mention them because they both had such great specific spunk and quirkiness to these characters. And Trinculo is supposed to be like that clownish character, but, like, this Trinculo, like, no, it's Bruce Dow's Trinculo. No one's gonna do it like him. Like, it's Bruce Dow. Like, and so there was so much of him in that role too that I was just so astonished by the way he was able to throw around the text and match it wonderfully with, like, the subtext of his motions and stuff. And then this Miranda, again, kind of bringing in the other Tempest we reviewed, she just crushed it for me, because again, it's like there's such a quirk and a naivete to her that, like, doesn't need to be played like an ingenue. I felt we got that a lot more in the other Tempest. It was a bit more like the innocence, the ingenue, whereas, like, this Miranda, like the log scene where of course she's gonna go and try to pick up the log, like, she just had that, like, grit that, again, we don't really get the opportunity to see in a lot of, like, written down in a lot of female characters. So I really appreciated how she took it upon herself as the character interpretation of bringing in these, like, quirky, more hard-edged ways of approaching her. So in a nutshell, Dion as our Caliban, Trish as our Miranda, and Bruce as our Trinculo were my golden trio.
Just to jump on that.
An obvious Plummer. Yeah. Topped with an obvious Plummer.
Thank you. Just to jump on that off of what you were saying about Dion Johnstone's voice as Caliban, I have to agree, he did have a very velvety voice. The cast, what I've noticed, I guess, very, very distinctly from the other productions that we've watched or that I've watched alongside you, this cast in particular was very much like an orchestra. Like, they each had very distinct voices. It was never a point where I thought, oh, who's speaking at what? Like, if I needed to turn around and look at my phone or refill my coffee, I could always tell who remained speaking, whose voice was still filling the air. It was very much like a musical piece. I feel like in the auditions they probably had them each sing a song, since there was a lot of singing in the. Is that part of the Stratford auditions? Do you have to sing a song?
You do. You do, no matter if you're doing a Shakespeare, like an Oscar Wilde, or a musical, they do have you sing, because the director, a lot of times there probably is going to be some type of musical element. Shakespeare is a very musical writer. Like, he has these songs written into his stuff, so you're going to be either leading the song or part of the ensemble who sing the song. So you do need to have some type of singing training. Unless you're Christopher Plummer, then you can
get just like the Sound of Music casting process, because they really picked some unique voices in there.
Yes,
as a whole, as the majority.
Yeah, I will say for me, my two shout-outs for best performance were Bruce Dow as Trinculo and Geraint Wayne Davies as Stefano. Because, fun fact, when I did this production at the Stratford Shakespeare School, I got to be Trinculo. So I got to do Trinculo for the first bit. So I got to do the whole...
I can see
the
that.
Fish. Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was so much. And then I got to do Prospero in the second half of the show, where I got to do the log scene as Prospero, which was a lot of fun. But I just love these two together. Like, I want a Trinculo Stefano spin-off musical featuring Geraint Wayne Davies and Bruce Dow just off on an adventure together. Like, I think they would be so wonderful. I mean, they had such a great chemistry. And I don't want to compare it to the Stephen Olmert and Tom McManus version, because they were great in their own right. But if I had a choice between, like, which pairing do you want, I gotta go with this one. Like, right off the bat, when Bruce Dow comes out on stage, that wonderful lisping kind of voice he does. and just the physicality that he brings to that role. It's just, and that like that little run around, or like my favorite thing is when he does the one of, this is what drinking and something else will do to you, like before he gets slapped again, like almost out to the audience. Like, it's just so great they all have, and they also have a genuine friendship where like when Grant does the I'm sorry I slapped, and then slaps him again for fun, like it's just so wonderful together, and they played off each other so well. And what really made them work better, I think, this production is that the dramatic scenes were really dramatic, and then you had this beautiful lightness that they brought into this performance that really kind of let them shine, versus the other production, which we talked about, which was very much on that same comedic level. So all their scenes kind of became a wash, while this one was very much, they were the comedy. They were the Shakespearean clowns who did their job of coming out at the right time to kind of liven up the audience. After we had the attempted assassination, we've had the Tempest, we've had Prospero giving his tragic backstory, and now you have these two yuckity-yuck clowns.
You know what's so refreshing about that too, Mac, from an actor perspective, is like knowing, I mean, we firsthand have seen Geraint Rune Davies in a ton of things in this previous series, and I've also had the privilege of seeing Bruce Dowell in some things too, and knowing the spectrum and the wide scale that both those actors have as performers too, like they can be very much like in these serious roles, they can, like knowing that they have that breadth, and then having this kind of be their scope, and then just slaying it, it adds that like background layers that makes you appreciate their camaraderie so much more in this moment. Yeah, absolutely.
And,
okay.
But before we move away from cast, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to friend of the company, David Collins, who plays Francisco in this, which I think is just great because Francisco is a very tiny role. He kind of just, his whole function is to come on and be like, King Alonso, your son might be alive, and that he's kind of just part of like their crew the whole time. But like what I really like is just seeing, because David owns every small role we've seen him in. Like he does it great. And like this one being from like probably much earlier, and obviously much earlier in his time at Stratford, and then just the development of next time he's in the Tempest, he is King Alonso. He goes from being the messenger to the king to taking on that role. I just like that. This was nice having this throwback and seeing him in there.
Absolutely. Well said, Ryan. Well said. Okay, so now we get into what was our favorite production or design element of this. Jill, you look like you're eager to jump on this one.
Yeah, so just because it can piggyback off nicely from Ed's kind of final comment of the character voices kind of creating a lot of levels for us. A thing that helped with the magic in this piece for me too was our revolving stage element, the little rounded circle that was the focal point in a lot of scenes, and definitely not in a distracting way, but just added those physical elements or different sort of varying degrees of magic. So the fact that it revolved, and we had that in the Stefano, Trinculo, and Caliban sort of canoe sequence, I loved that because it sort of became the water. And the first thing that came to my mind seeing this element was the way that the stage was set up, having this sort of whirlpool in the middle, and then the way scenes would exit or enter, they would kind of go into like certain spokes or certain like pathways backstage, and to me it just kind of came, it was like a wave, like how a wave comes onto shore, envelops, and then curls back into itself, and sort of we see this unraveling and this cycle going back and forth throughout the whole production. And then when they sort of added the trapdoor element to, you know, having that sort of arced, raked stage and aerials like sitting on it again, those levels, not only are you getting sort of like a ground balcony level difference, now you're getting like a slanted level difference, and that's going that played really nicely with the magical sort of floating feather floating sword elements too, right? So it was lovely to see this stationary element of the stage be maneuvered and played upon. So to me, that was my favorite production element.
I'm gonna piggyback off you because I also put the set as my favorite element, because it just Des McAnuff, he's a really interesting director where like he has these really kind of unique sets that I don't think Stratford's done since he's left, where whether or not it's like his 12th night where he had this giant shattered mirror and a revolving mini fridge in 12th night, or his As You Like It, where it was the melting clocks and butterfly floor. Like, he has a wonderful design brain. And yet, this wonderful elaborate design he did for this stage with this revolving circle that opens and shuts and does all this, but it's very plain. Like, the stage isn't full of other things. It's just this empty stage that has like maybe a barrel or a chest that pop up on it, and he just used that whole space so well. Like, whether or not it's Ariel popping up on the balcony, or the goddesses coming out from the Voms, or I've never seen a production at Stratford use that trap door as much as he used it in this production, whether it was Ariel kind of climbing out of it, Caliban coming out of it. I still don't know how they do that frickin' Christopher Plummer floating trick. Because they go around him. My only thought is that there's a plastic seat that comes out of the cane.
It's a rigid cane. It's a rigid cane with like rebar, and it's a plastic seat that he's sitting on. It's beautiful. I love it.
It totally plays the trick on you, because they made a very particular point of, let's go around him to show that there is nothing holding him up.
There's no back to it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's so fascinating.
Just to briefly touch back on that too, Mac, like, because of the minimalist of the set and so the specificity, we were able to like notice those magical moments, right? Of like the levitating or the floating sword, and then also going back to talking about this. My whole thing is, like, if you're going to have a minimalist set, you have to have the company bring the piece alive, right? And that goes within their relationships with each other and how they tackle the text. And then just going back to our character question, like, the company was clearly very much on board and with each other. So it even bled perfectly into there being this wonderful, specific minimalist set portrayal.
Ryan?
Well, like, I had a backup thing because I felt like someone would take the stage magic, but like, I just need to give like an extra shout out to the stage magic of this production. I know we've already, but like, just this is why you do the Tempest in my mind. It is with like Midsummer being maybe the next like closest. It is the Shakespeare play that just allows you to really put the spectacle forward, and like, this production did not hold back, like, with just the floating sword, the lights, the invisible or the feather to show that Ariel was invisible. Like, just I wrote down like 9 or 10 separate individual things like stage magic while I was watching, just because I was so magic. And like even like the balancing on the cane, like, I understand how it's done, but it doesn't make me any less impressed that they went to the trouble to do it just for that like one moment of, look at me, haha, I'm floating. But like, because we already kind of got into that, there was another production element that I think deserves a special shout out too, and that's the sound design and the music. And it's probably not even the parts you're thinking of, because it's not the like individual like Ariel songs and like all those stuff. Like, that's all great too, and I don't have a problem with any of that, but just this kind of like underlying score that was kind of going on during this production. Because one moment, and I refrained from mentioning James Blendick as my cast pick for Gonzalo in here, because I wanted to bring this up more so as a production element in here. But I loved Gonzalo in this production, where I mentioned in the last production that he was my least favorite performance. Gonzalo's actor was my least favorite performance last time. And I think
Scott Wentworth who did it last time.
No, it was Rod Beatty, I think.
Rod Beatty, yes. Yeah, you're right.
Beatty, so, but the Gonzalo, James Blendick this time, while the performer was great and I could sing his praises, in the scene where he's kind of like going on and on about his like wisdom of the island, and Antonio and Sebastian are mocking him. In the other production we watched with Graham Abbey and Andre Sills as those two roles, there was like no underlying music beneath that, and as a result it kind of felt like the production, and this maybe played into the comedy of that production in general, but the production was agreeing with them that this is a character that deserves to be mocked, Gonzalo, when he is in fact the moral center of the play. But the fact that even while they're doing this mocking, there's like this low hum of just like beautiful music underscoring every time Gonzalo spoke in this production, that made me think, even if the characters on stage are mocking him, the production is not. The production agrees that this is the character we need to sympathize with and listen to. And like, I think that is just such like a beautiful, subtle use of sound design that I really feel like this production needs credit for. When we see what happens when just that little bit is lacked, it really tells the audience that, oh, we don't need to listen to this guy. Look, even the characters don't respect him. But what the other production maybe missed in that point is that those characters are the villains. We're not supposed to be enjoying their mockery of the moral center of the play. We're supposed to disagree with them.
I mean, this score is very cinematic, and Des McAnuff, as the director of Jersey Boys and a bunch of other musicals, he knows music. And I think that really showed in this production, where he knew where these musical underscores had to come in to help accent a moment. Just like in a music, like in musicals, people forget there's a lot of times musical underscoring that helps tell the story. And it's the same thing here, where this was a very musical Tempest, where the music came through and it really accented the moments. Like, it was an epic score, like just like the music that they played at the curtain call. But that was that was epic sounding. Like, it was beautiful. Like, you're right. The sound was fantastic in this production. It really was a musical, beautiful production of the Tempest. That really, and you're right. The Gonzalo scene was heartbreaking when he's doing this beautiful description that's just trickling through. It was gorgeous. Ed.
So I thought the set was wonderful. I wish that they used the slant or the angling of the center stage a bit more. I feel like you could have got a lot more sculptures. I mean, if for like actors being placed on top of it or against it, or I guess put in positions of power with it. So I feel like they could have used that a lot more. But my favorite design element to the entire show was the lighting. I thought the use and the absence of lighting in some of the spots, like the use of shadows, how Ariel would fly to or from the shadows. Prospero would skulk in the shadows, listening to conversations, scoffing, or how Caliban emerged from shadows. I thought that was an excellent use of lighting, and it really added to the mysticism of the Tempest, right? Where shadows and mists are these ethereal shapes or forms or suggestions, themes, right? So the lighting, I have to give it to, was my favorite.
Agreed. And the lighting is really neat, because we'll talk about this when we get to the Ariel costume in our later question. But just like, you could tell they thought about the lighting this time, because it was so dynamic, and like under certain lights, her costume glowed. Like, lighting was like, Stuart Will isn't on this one, because he always talks about the bland lighting that the production usually have. But this time it was like really dynamic.
Right? Like when Ariel had her wings, when she was as terrifying and intimidating as the sea storms, or right? It was you're right. At different angles, different positions, she looks either fearsome or jolly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Love that.
Wonderful. I'm going to start the next one just because it's a piggyback off something Jill mentioned earlier for what was the weakest part of the production. And I have to say it's the love plot. It's Trish Lindstrom as Miranda and Gareth Potter as Ferdinand. I was not a fan of this love plot. I found it lacked chemistry and was kind of a really boring element of this play, where I was like waiting to get back to either the assassination plot with Antonio and Sebastian, or the other assassination plot with Caliban, Stefano, and Trinculo. Like, there were other plots that were engaging me more, and just the two of them all the time, like, their love plot was kind of like, okay, here we go. We got the Shakespeare love plot here. Like, it just didn't engage me like everything else did. And it's interesting because the 2018 production, that was actually one of the elements I did like, was the chemistry between those two. And just rewatch this, I was like, yeah, this just doesn't feel the same level of romance and hotness between the two of them. Like, I there's just something lacking in that chemistry.
You know what I think part of it too, Mac, just to speak on that too, it seemed like they were both operating like different versions of the characters, but like not synergizing them. Like, for example, like I said, Trish was kind of taking it away from like naive ingenue and being a little bit more avant-garde or like edgier with it, but then our Ferdinand was still like pumpkin pants, I'm a regal prince, where it's like I wanted to see quirkiness in him too, you know what I mean, to like literally marry the two, but it just seemed like they were almost both in different productions. Whereas at least when we think back to the Martha Henry one, both the Miranda and Ferdinand both had that little like doe-eyed, quirky, naive sense that it like worked. So I know what you're saying. It just seemed like they were in different productions sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Joe. You articulated it much better than I could. My last line was, the B plot and C plot should be overtaking the A love plot. And I was like, that's what happened in this. We're like at the end of act. It was. I also just want to note that it was a very long act one, where like the intermission comes really late.
Which
Production, and the fact that it ends with these 3 different plot lines all revolving, and I was like, oh good, we got this one, and I was like, oh, we got Miranda. And
well, see, like I kind of like, I liked where they put the intermission this one, even though it's like quite literally an hour and a half before the intermission and 40 minutes after. I do think, and I commented on this in the last panel we did on the Tempest, was that they put the intermission right at the end of Act 2 when we first meet Stefano and Trinculo, and I thought that's just like, granted, that is the halfway point of the play if you were like even on the page or in the production. But I think like it's so weird that we've just met the last of our principal players and now we're cutting to intermission. Like, this is a very strangely paced play to begin with, that I like that we took time to, okay, we've met everyone, but let's settle more into the plot before we got to intermission, even if it meant a very short post-intermission act.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was the weakest point of the production was the love plot. Jill, what was your comment on this?
That's a good segue as well, because I kind of had 2 weak things to mention, and one of them was character scene specific too. So I think this is just the Tempest for me in general, because there's a lot of magic going on. The sort of human scenes can be very boring and very like dry. And once again, this happened for me the last Tempest we watched too, but Alonso's crew scenes as a whole are not captivating. Like, and even the way it was staged for me, it was the exact same that like in the other 2018 version, where it's like they're all just sitting around. And I know you can't really do much else with those scenes, and I think that's where you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. But maybe switch up what rocks and what hard places you're using to do these scenes. Because I'm like, I've seen this like all splaying out in the meadows. Woe is me. Where's our son? Let's go find. It's like, I don't know. I just feel like, I always feel bad for the actors in that moment, because it's like your characters matter to this plot too, but you're just kind of placed upon. I just feel like it's that scene that's like
it's
rushed
an exposition
over
scene. That's
in
what
these
it is.
in these productions, right? Because you're so focused on hitting the Prospero stuff and hitting the magic that it's like, okay, and then this is just the filler Shakespeare scene. Just do it, good God, we locked it in, awesome. Like, so I did like the score, like Ryan was mentioning, like the different levels that the lighting and sound were able to give us in those moments spiced it up a bit for me. But again, it's like, and I think both versions we watched too, all the men sort of look similar. So if you're not familiar with the piece, which I am familiar with it now, I had studied it before we watched 2018 version, and then watching the 2018 version, I absolutely knew who all these men were. But I remember watching the 2018 version, watching this version, being like, there's really no, I don't see any visible hierarchy in these men. They're all dressed similarly. They all do have a point where they speak. And like, again, with Ed saying they could have used that level as like a power mongering thing, and they didn't. So I kind of, that part felt dry to me. And then, kind of contrasting Ed, but not really, I did also like the lighting a lot. But if I were to get super picky, because there were so many moments that were so specific and did play upon the ethereal, like shadow-esque, mist-esque moments, there were some moments where it did seem like it was just a wash on the stage. And I have this thing that if you're going to be particular and very specific,
be it all the
that's
way through.
awesome. But like, you can't like, again, it seemed like we ran out of time, or our lighting grid isn't proper in this one moment, so we're just going to wash the stage. And I'm like, It's kind of similar to our Coriolanus, when they were really using the like scoping in widescreen sort of movie-esque things, and then there were scenes where they weren't using it, or they were like flying it away at like a weird time. I was like, oh, that seemed just like a rushed design element that they were like, we don't have time for this, or like we don't know how to deal with this, so just pop it up. But I'm like, people are going to notice it if we're like diving in.
To quickly jump on your with the raising of the stage and how they could have used that for, like, how cool would it have been if all of the it was a Duke, correct?
Yeah.
It was
right, the king Alonso.
The king.
Yeah,
yes,
there's King Alonso, but there's Duke Antonio.
Yes, Duke Antonio. Yeah.
How cool would it have been if the king was the one to sleep on the slant, and then everybody slept in circles, and then when it came to the assassination, the two were stepping up onto the ramp.
Right.
Just to have that visual image of them.
You raise the stage, and it raised the stakes. It raises the stakes.
Exactly.
Yeah, with literal stakes in hand.
So many steaks, I'm getting kind of hungry.
I know. Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, I mean, those scenes are always the trickiest to do, just because they are just basic exposition where it's like, we came from here, we dropped off the daughter, we're coming back, we got stuck in the storm, and now we gotta, like, say that Ferdinand survived to plant that. See, like, it's a very exposition-y. It's kind of like the Council of Elrond in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like, you gotta do
like
this
the
scene.
In the books, he goes on forever in the lore.
It's one of the dumbest
awesome,
chapters of the books.
But
it's that basic, like, thing of, we got to get through this exposition moment to continue the story.
But it's also kind of... Yeah, sorry, Mac, you want to go?
Yeah, but the one thing I will say is I did like John Vickery as Antonio, because at least he matched a little bit more in age to Plummer's Tempest, where I found in the 2018 production, I forget who played Antonio.
It was Graham Abbey.
Graham Abbey and Martha Henry were way off in age, where I was like, she could be his mother, not his sister. So listen to this person, I was like, okay, I actually can kind of believe, like, Antonio's the younger, like, usurping brother. And funny enough that John Vickery originated the role of Scar in Broadway's The Lion King. So another usurping brother he got to play.
Nice. Life's not fair.
Exactly.
All I was going to say before is, while we were bagging on this scene, and it's not even about this production, it's just like that always bothered me about this scene, even reading it, even watching any other production I've seen, is that there's no good reason why Ariel doesn't put Antonio and Sebastian to sleep, except for to show the audience that, oh, if I leave them alone for a minute, they'll do something evil. But, like, Ariel knows they're evil already. Like, why? Like, that is purely for the audience's benefit. It does not advance the drama at all in the world of the play.
Magic.
Yeah,
I think it's just input. Hey, here's magic.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's just
Ariel
showing
getting boring. We need some magic.
Yeah, well, and like, it's Ariel showing off, basically, like, haha, and the characters kind of hang this lampshade on it. They're like, hey, why did they all fall asleep at once? We feel perfectly awake. I'm like, yeah, why didn't you fall asleep? Like, why?
Ariel got distracted. That's why.
I almost feel like it was
for another mission.
I almost feel like it was like in the rehearsal studio, the director's just pacing, and he's like, what if? Like, just like, what if? Jazz hands sleep.
There we go. Ryan? Your weakest part is.
So, like, I was kind of hoping you would forget about me on this one, because while I do have an answer, it is something that I know we're going to talk about in a later question, so I might ask to go first for that one. But sneak preview, it's Caliban's costume, which we can talk about that later.
Yes, okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll save it for later. All right, Ed, what was your weakest design element?
So wait, are we doing the weakest design or production? Because
just weakest element of the production in general.
Overall, what was your weakest part of the production?
I say there were 3 weak moments. The one that you had mentioned between the crewmen, Jill, where definitely there was something that there should have been a bit more. There could have been a bit more. And then the love scenes between Miranda and Ferdinand, and I think also the scenes between Caliban, Stefano, and Trinculo, like, and I would say that their second interaction And even their first interaction to a certain degree was the weakest, because if we were to categorize Shakespeare's themes within this show, where it's like, okay, primary themes, secondary primary scenes, secondary scenes, I think definitely the love story between Ferdinand and Miranda is a secondary, which is almost, I think, entirely in reference to Prospero's growth towards the end, or throughout. And then also that the scene between Trinculo, Stefano, and Caliban is very like primary theme, where that explores a lot of the heart of the play, where they have that, where they go over like that, like, or I guess stimulate that slave master mentality or process, right? And that it was almost just a big grab for laughs, in my opinion, and that the comedy plateaued after the first scene that they had together. Like the amount of movement that they were doing just wasn't the same. The I guess the different uses of voice and tactics that were I guess I felt like it was more forceful trying to get a laugh, as opposed to try to, like, something that was very clever in the first scene that they did together was when Caliban would speak to Stefano and then he would just listen and then ignore it, right? It's like, okay, Caliban never had a voice, even when he was given like something to drink, right? And then, I mean, at the end of it, he was just trying to use them to kill Prospero. But after that scene, it just didn't seem to go any further than that. And I think that's such a big, their dynamic is such a big suggestion towards the heart of the piece that it was kind of, I think, lost.
Fair.
Well
Fair. Yeah. All right.
Mic
in that
drop.
case, mic drop, and we're just going to end it right here.
That's actually, no, but that's just to really briefly touch on that too. That is actually something that to think of like the three of them, even though Trinculo and Stefano have like their friendship relationship, like they really are introduced as like three very different like archetypal characters and like coming literally from different parts of the stage, but yet they do all have that like underdog mentality, and the three of them could work together and do something to sort of like speak against the people in power of the piece. And you know, it is interesting because this piece has not necessarily just a cut and dry A plot, B plot. There is essentially like C plots or even like sub series of plots. Absolutely, you could. I wouldn't even have thought of that. Is you could use that trio and sort of stage it in a way where, as much as they're using each other, the big picture thing that maybe they're not realizing, but the audience could, is you could make a statement of them in a way working together to like usurp people of power. Yeah,
exactly. I see them as three of one. They're all the fool of Shakespeare, and that with the fool, you know, you're taught something. But I feel like it was just lost that teaching.
Yeah. True. Oh, you know what? You're absolutely right. I mean, thinking about it more and more now, like, yeah, they are the representative, like, the downstairs group, and I mean, like, what is the thing that like trips them up at the end to get before the assassination? It's not some magic. It's not some big elaborate trap that Prospero sets. It's garments.
Yeah.
It's the chance to dress like royalty.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what trips them up at the end. I never thought. Wow, Ed, you just gave me a whole new.
Right, literally could trip them up because if the garments are too long, then they're gonna take a tumble. You know,
So Mac, put that into your musical that you write about the.
Perfect.
Yes, my musical. I'll add that to my list of different Shakespeare shows to turn into musicals. Tempest is now in there.
I did like that they pointed out with the gowns that they were silver and that we're running into the woods, and it's like how easily spottable they will be for these fish Cthulhu monsters.
And I like how this production really like played up the mud that they had just fallen into prior to that scene, because I don't remember that being as pronounced in the 2018 production, but like the fact that they're covered in mud and like, look, all this beautiful clean clothes that makes us feel like royalty, like that even just adds this extra dimension of why this is worth stopping for.
Exactly. And I think it would give more credence to if the king was resting on a higher platform too, as someone that doesn't touch the ground.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Ed,
Nice.
giving us all these great thoughts. Love it. Yeah, okay, so why don't we head into, did this production hit the mark? Is it worth the watch? Ed, you can start us off on this one.
I think so. I think it is worth the watch. I think on a number of levels as a spectacle, I think it's something that would be fun to go out and see as an introduction to the Tempest. I think it would be great to see. This was my first time watching a full-scale production of the Tempest, not just snippets or monologues of people doing it. But I think this performance really brought out the magic that can be done on the stage. And yeah, I think it did hit the mark.
Jill.
Yep, I completely agree. Basically, reiterating what Ed is saying, the idea bringing in of the magic, and with this piece being so magical, like you need it there, but also Shakespeare sort of opens up his doors to kind of add magical elements to his pieces regardless, and like this was done in a wonderful way. Everyone, all the actors in this, like we've mentioned before, had such an amazing grasp of their text and their physicality. Even though some relationships maybe didn't land, each individual person, I think, landed. So that would be great for students and theater students to come and see this as like an example of that. What was wonderful with this production is, I've said this on almost every panel, but to me, the most captivating productions are ones that take Shakespeare's text and throw it into some sort of era or some sort of modern take on the text. And you know, like present it in that realm, so that the audiences can not only grasp the Shakespearean text, but they can also get on board with the time period or the setting or the circumstances that are being broadcast on the stage. So what was really awesome about this production for me is that it didn't fully need to, it was kind of a hybrid of like a traditional staging of a Shakespeare mixed with like a modern, ethereal, post-apocalyptic possible vibe of a Shakespeare. Like our costumes, which we'll get into too, like gave us that opportunity too. Like some costumes to me seemed futuristic, where some seemed very Renaissance, and like again that blend, similar to like what we had in Coriolanus of not really knowing what time period we might be in, but like getting on board with it regardless. I think it's this was a wonderful package of showing the many different ways that you can stage a Shakespeare, and like yet it all seems to be the same production. So and also the we'll get into this more too, but the blending of the comedy and the dark underbelly that this text presents too was presented really well in this production. So yes, check the boxes.
Wonderful. Ryan, as our resident TA, would you show this production?
I quite literally, this production is what I picture in my head when I read The Tempest. Like everything, every decision that is made, from the casting and the acting to the designs, like this is just, this is the perfect staging in my mind. So of course, if we were studying The Tempest in a class, this would be the one I would show. I think I even said, like, when we asked the same question for the 2018 production, I said, I don't know if this one, it would be the one I would show. I would probably show the Christopher Plummer one over this, because I had seen this prior to now. And yes, I think this is the one. And like, yeah, just wonderful cast. Christopher Plummer is amazing, and he kind of just is Prospero. Like even like other roles that he's done semi lately, like I don't know if any of you saw, I guess this isn't even that recent anymore, but like the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, the Terry Gilliam film, that was Heath Ledger's final role. He died midway through production.
I watched it a long time ago.
Film. Yeah, like it's an interesting movie, but Plummer's character in that, the titular Dr. Parnassus, is basically just Prospero. And like to me, Christopher Plummer is like, you know, just what I picture when I think of Prospero. William Hutt is like a close second, but sadly he's no longer with us. And like that is just like the Stratford image that I think is the best possible version. But yeah, wonderful cast, dazzling effects, just the beautiful atmosphere that I've kind of already touched on with the magic and the music. And if I can just kind of comment on one thing here, the goddesses scene. which I pulled no punches about how that was my least favorite thing about the 2018 production. And I, like, again, if it were up to me, that would just get the first thing to get cut. If I was staging the show, like, I understand the logic of having it just because this is a really dude heavy play, and especially if you're not gonna gender bend any of the characters, like, hey, here's 3 roles for women, otherwise it's just Miranda. But at the same time, this scene, like, adds nothing. It's just like, and I like that it kind of just came and went here. I would have preferred if they cut it, but they did just like a subtle, here is a nice little show of these goddesses. They didn't like turn it into this massive over budget fireworks display like the other production did. And something I even liked is like when, Prospero remembers, oh wait, Stefano, Trinculo, and Caliban are going to try to kill me. I need to put an end to this. Like, he was like shouting at it, yelling it, like, away, away. There was like thunder. Even he was kind of like sick of it by that point. Which I'm just like, yes, if you are going to include this scene, you might as well have the characters on stage also think it's weird that it's here. Even the character who conjured it up. So just the fact that this is a better version of what I thought was the weakest point of that other production, like, yeah, all around, this is my Tempest, and I would recommend it to anyone.
Very good. I will say, for me, if it's between showing either the 2018 production or this 2010 production, I will absolutely show the 2010 production first, because the pacing is so much better in this. Like, just comparing the Martha Henry backstory scene right after the Tempest to the Plummer version. Plummer's version flies. Like, it is so
literally
fast. Yeah, like it's so good. And just both productions had wonderful magic, but I just think the set was so much more exciting and visual to watch with that tilting circle and the way in the canoe scenes, like they just used that stage so much better in this version. And overall, I just think it's a really solid production. Like, and it's very cinematic. Like, this filming with the way they did the opening thing, where it's like the zoom in on Prospero on the balcony, or the zoom in on Miranda on the other side of the balcony. Like, I remember watching it in the theater and having Christopher Plummer end up sitting next to me as I'm watching this opening Tempest, because we were up on the balcony in the aisle, basically. Yeah, it was so cool. Overall, like, this is just such a great production to show people, because it makes the show really accessible, because it gets the comedy and the drama, and the dialogue is so clear that you can follow. Like, like, I found watching the Duke exposition scene so dry in the other one that, like, I was starting to nod off when I was watching into the theater, because it just kind of went on and on. But this one at least had some drive and some energy to it that was lacking in this other production, that I just went, yeah, I definitely got to show this one over the 2018. As much as that had some beautiful moments and actors in it, it was like, yeah, I'll go for 2010. 2010 all the way. So, yes, this production most certainly hit its mark and is well worth the watch. Especially as a Canadian with Christopher Plummer. I mean, the great Captain Von Trapp himself. getting to do Shakespeare. You can't go wrong. Okay. Yes, exactly. All right, so now let's kind of do a little bit more compare and contrast, because as we've noted, we've done a 2018 production and we've also now done a 2010 production. So we're going to do a little bit of compare and contrast with
all of that we've done so far wasn't the compare and contrast?
That was more just production talk in general.
We mentioned both productions enough times.
It's true, but now we're really
towards
exactly. Now we're like really creeping. Now we're diving into the comparisons here. So right off the top, we're going to compare Prosperos, because we've had a female Martha Henry Prospero, and we've had a very classical male Christopher Plummer Prospero. Who wants to? Jill, you want to start this one?
I have a wonderful thesis to start us off for this one. So with the Tempest, the story is wavy and magical, but it needs to be anchored. And with Christopher Plummer, we 1000% got that anchor. With, for me, Martha Henry, not at all. Like, and I think, going back to what you're saying about this production, the 2010 production being more fluid, and the pace just kind of like melting off of each other and just being plowed through like this big tidal wave that's specific enough. I did not get that at all in the 2018 Tempest, and I think it's because like you literally, Prospero's not really on stage as much as like other titular characters in Shakespeare's works are, but it's an overbearing presence, and literally Prospero has to steer the ship. Otherwise, I think the production has the opportunity to fall flat. And I just found with Martha Henry's depiction, everything was very episodic. Like it seemed like everything could exist kind of like on its own, and it made the experience very choppy to watch. And it steered away from, I kept having to kind of try to be on board with her interpretation and try to understand the growth that she was putting towards the character. But because I had to keep doing that every time her interactions came on the stage, it distracted me away from the magical elements, from the other relationships, from the other, like I would not even deduced what we just found from Stefano, Trinculo, and Caliban through this production. Like that depth would not even be deduced in the 2018 production, because my brain didn't have the opportunity to kind of flow into all of these relationships, because I kept having to like try to figure out Martha Henry's Prospero. And in a way, like there's moments in these episodes that it worked, but it didn't draw, like I said, it didn't be over, there wasn't enough of an overbearing presence. I think if anything, like I wanted her to be more crass and not play like the more like ancient wise Prospero. I wanted her to be more like badass power monger Prospero, and I think that's something that Christopher Plummer does both. You can tell that he's aged, you can tell that he's downtrodden throughout the whole experience, but he never falters. His power is still so much rooted in him up until his final speeches. Like he is emanating that like, this is my, I am in control, I am ruling, even when he sort of reneges that, like it's still a presence, it's still a glow that he has. But Martha Henry just didn't give that gravitas. So very different Prosperos work in the episodes they were in, but the piece overall, like Plummer's Prospero was leaps and bounds more anchored for me than Martha Henry's was, and I think that's super vital to drive the whole piece. And if not, you're gonna have a lot of hiccups along the way.
Ed?
I have to agree with Jill on pretty much every single one of her points. I agree with how Christopher Plummer's Prospero exudes that power, and that his power shifts. Nonetheless, he still has the power, but his power shifts from this, I guess, natural, mystical, like physical prowess to the moral superiority by the end of it, where he takes the higher road and is still the one on top at the end of it. And yeah, he seemed more as of a puppeteer, as somebody who was trying to be involved with Martha Henry's, I guess, like just the distinction. But I think the biggest thing would just be the fluidity of the performance. So Christopher Plummer had an amazing flow that just kept that, like you were saying, Mac, how his story whizzed by. The thing that we learn with acting is that like you can't expect people to get it as you were saying it. And when it is said, that's when people reflect and connect the dots. And so he just kept going. He just kept the flow up, trusting that the audience was, smart and doing their due diligence to pay attention and all that stuff. It was a very, I guess, musical like performance, right? So that would be my biggest difference between the two.
Well said, Ed. Well said.
So for me, I have to say, Plummer, as I kind of just got done saying in the previous question, he is my Prospero. This production really does that. That said, and like for all the manifold great reasons that Jill and Ed have both brought up already, and we've kind of been talking about this whole time. That said, I kind of feel like we might be being a little too hard on Martha Henry, and maybe back then too, because like, I know it's easy to say, oh, Christopher Plummer. Well, of course it's Christopher Plummer, but like, aside from the fact that he's a famous movie star as well, like as far as Stratford is concerned, usually you would say, well, of course it's good. It's Martha Henry. Like, Martha Henry is an excellent performer, and even if
Yes.
I kind of don't even know if I'm a little reluctant to say that she was the problem with that production for me. Like, and others can disagree with that, but I think she had a very difficult task ahead of her with that production. And it comes down to the fact that she was, I believe, Stratford's first female Prospero, correct?
She was.
Yeah, and like also coming off not too many years after Helen Mirren played it in the Julie Taymor movie, which, hey, Helen Mirren, who was also in The Last Confession, opposite Plummer.
There you go.
Full circle. Yeah, but so I think, like, to me, Martha Henry felt like she was very much trying to be every other Prospero she's seen, more so than being her own version of the character. I felt like she was trying to be Helen Mirren, she was trying to be Plummer, she was trying to be William Hutt, etc., etc. And I don't really, after leaving that production, I don't feel like I saw what the Martha Henry version of Prospero really was. And like, I think it's just like a very difficult challenge. And also, and like, I think maybe something that would have helped, and I know we talked about this a bit last time too, but I think she could have leaned more into the, quote, femininity of the character, because being a female Prospero, and not just being like a female playing a male Prospero, but actually like they changed the dialogue to be my mother as opposed to my father and my sister. I think, yeah, the fact that she seems to be channeling all of the Prosperos that came before her really kind of made it kind of just like, I just think, yeah, like, I think the biggest issue with the Martha Henry performance was, well, one, it was just in my mind an inferior production overall, so that didn't help, and two, that there's just less that I can really hang on to of what she was going for with that role, whereas Plummer is this like very like wise, paternalistic, chuckling along the way. Like, I get what Plummer's going for, whereas I think there was almost just maybe too much pressure on Martha to make her own, or maybe she was trying to like play too much off of the fact of like, this is just me being me, when like and like without kind of thinking about, well, what is you as Prospero. And like, I like Martha Henry, so I don't really want to like poo-poo on her performance too much. I've seen plenty of great performances she's been in.
Yeah, just to jump on that, Ryan, like I don't think Martha Henry was the downfall of the 2018 performance. I think there are other elements, and I think something that people I guess sometimes can overlook are the production elements, the rehearsal elements, the directing elements. Like there's direction involved in an actor's performance. Sometimes you don't get the choices that you want, or you see things differently. So I definitely think that there were other things that contributed to I guess a favoring of 2010 versus 2018, but I wouldn't say that's a definitive of that performance is definitive of Martha Henry as an actress.
It is the only one we've reviewed, though. I will say she has not appeared in any of these other productions, so it is like the cup seems pretty down on Martha Henry. So let's clear the air on that.
No. My whole thing is, I think it's because we haven't seen her often. But to kind of talk to your like playing more on this feminine energy and seeing how that plays in with like power and position. I have to say, like, I want to see like Shauna McKenna play Prospero. Like, I've seen enough tactile sort of depictions of her again having this breadth, this spectrum. And again, I haven't personally seen Martha Henry in a ton of things, more so like than Shauna McKenna. So like maybe I'm being biased to Shauna McKenna right now, but just as another example, like that's the sort of gravitas that I see a female Prospero starting with. Like, but the examples that we've had of Shauna McKenna, of like this fire, this spunk, this like, you are playing the role you're given, but you know that it's Shauna McKenna as the nurse in Romeo and Juliet, which she slayed. You know that it's Shauna McKenna like as Gertrude, exactly. And like that again, and maybe it is what Ed is saying, like it has to do with like direction as well. Like like I just like, I wish she would have just been like, this is my Prospero, because I feel like someone like again, and just using this as an example, like Shauna McKenna's Prospero, like maybe it wouldn't be what I'm saying, but I just like knowing that the fire that she's had in previous productions that we've reviewed, that's the type of like overflowing fire I kind of want a female Prospero to have, because I think it can be done. I'm not like fully on board of gender bending that role particularly, but if it is done, I think it has to be very aware of the feminine and masculine qualities and play them both and know that you're playing them both and own the shit out of both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I swore, but we're allowed one swear word per panel.
We go by
But you need to
guidelines.
you need to know that you're using both sides of yourself and really hit that home. And if you don't, and it is going to be more work for the female, and especially a female playing a male role, like, so if you don't do that, in my opinion, it's like it just lacks a difference and a uniqueness. So yeah, that's my little debate on that, Dad.
And even if we didn't want to look at it as, you know, male, like masculine, feminine with the Prospero role, like inherently it is like that character is as magnificent as a storm.
Yeah,
he is written to herald storms, so use that as a
well, and it kind of goes to what Ed brought up too, and I was gonna snowball off of Ed, but then we went to Ryan. But like this idea too, we talked about how Christopher Plummer's Prospero is an example, and maybe this is because like the realm of the production allowed him to do this, but he had such a deep and specific relationship with like Ariel that was so different, but also so equally deep and specific to Caliban. And it's because of that, like as this super overbearing, powerful leader, it's so smart for him to have these personal sort of like pockets of people. That's a way of him just like showing his power, but and giving his power, but not relenting it too much, right? Whereas with Martha Henry, and again, it might just be the production that was at hand for her too, every relationship seemed a bit surface based and like flippant remarks or flippant commands, and it was like that is a characteristic of a leader, but the span of, like Ed was saying, like Prospero literally moves storms. He can't have the qualities he can't have surface based qualities, right? Like they have to go deep too. And again, I think it is a production thing, and maybe there being this unnecessary pressure that I just wish she had stripped away all other Prosperos, quite literally, and just made it her own. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I love Martha Henry, but
I do love Martha Henry. I mean, I'm excited to see her Three Women production she's going to be doing in the new season.
Yeah, Three Tall Women. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Three Tall Women. Sorry, I have a sneeze sitting in the back of my nose right now. So I'm trying not to sneeze. Anyway, but yeah, like I love Martha Henry. I just think I think it came down that she was miscast as Prospero. As much as I love Martha Henry, and it's something we talked about in our last Tempest thing. It's like there are I'm sure you can gender bend any Shakespeare role that you want to. It's does the text give you the backup to do it? And we're going to be talking more about this when we do our Shakespeare and gender roundtable discussion coming out later on in September, so stay tuned for that. But there are some roles that are just really male energy based, and Prospero is one, and Christopher Plummer brought that. Like there's a vengeful energy about his Prospero that right from the moment he comes out with a freaking telescope, he had this aura about him that filled this space, and that vengeful energy slowly but surely morphed and mellowed like the storm. And he had this beautiful art to him, and he had these colors and layers that he brought that Martha Henry just didn't bring. And part of that, I don't know if it's like, for me, like it's a father. It's very much along the lines of King Lear. It's a father's story giving up his daughter. That's Prospero's driving plot story. It's a vengeful man trying to get back at all the people who's wronged him, and he's giving up his daughter. That's Prospero. Like it's very male energy, and Christopher Plummer just brought that energy to life for me in a way that, like, I love Martha Henry. I really do. And I love Shauna McKenna and Lucy Peacock. Stratford has some fantastic leading ladies in their productions. But this is just one of these roles that once I saw Christopher Plummer do it, it reminded me of why I think Prospero works the best. Because I've seen the Helen Mirren version, and Helen Mirren is, once again, another fantastic actress. But for me, I just went, yeah, Prospero has this fairly masculine energy about him. As much as I love gender bending and try it all you want, but there's just something about the male Prospero that really hit it for me on the head.
I have to agree with you, because it would be, I mean, as interesting as it would be if Prospero came from a mothering perspective with the text as it suggests of Prospero's more father-like qualities, how that would probably take away from, because he's very much one of those, if I was to look at it as a sculptor, he's very chiseled, defined character, as opposed to some of the other ones where you could leave more room for interpretation.
Yeah. And like I was saying too, I feel like it just adds that extra layer of work for like the female actor too. Even if you were to strip away the gender and just play Prospero as Prospero, you're dealing with like this text that is already like quite foreign to you know, your vocabulary, but then also you, especially like I was saying, like you have to have like a full grasp on not only the masculinity but the femininity, because like you just have to, right? And yeah, I think there's other characters that it'd be easier for an actor to tap into, and also more elaborate and interesting of gender bending. In this piece too, like I definitely think there can be room for some of the men, some of like Alonso's crew too could easily be female or gender stripped too. But I agree.
I guess none of this to say that it can't ever
anything can
I think it'd be a lot of work.
It's a lot
exactly
of work.
what you were saying. It would be a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, and as Autumn, our wonderful Autumn, has coined it, dramaturgical due diligence has to be done if you're going to be doing that. Martha Henry, we do love you. Please.
Yes, yeah.
Please
we all love you very much.
Please come on to the show.
Yes, come on.
We would love to have Martha Henry come on and join us. She's a lovely, lovely lady. Okay.
Defend yourself.
No defense is needed. No defense is needed. Okay. All right. So now let's into the next question. So the costume design for Ariel and Caliban differed greatly between these two productions we've seen. Which design elements did you prefer? And did the costumes for Ariel and Caliban in this particular production give you a new view or interpretation of these characters? Ryan, you have been like chomping at the bit for this question, so I'm going to let you go first.
So like I said this exact same thing in the previous Tempest panel. I don't like Caliban costumes that are designed to dehumanize him. And that is what both of these productions have done. This one, I think, even more so than the other one, because he's like half green, half completely skinned with his like musculature hanging out. But like the other one, like with his old like seashell arm and everything, like I think that both of these costumes look amazing visually. They are striking and stunning to look at, and like especially the contact lenses in this one, I'm just like, oh, that is so creepy. One is like super bloodshot and the other is yellow, and like but Caliban is human, I think, is something that needs to be stated at the first like production meeting of every single production of The Tempest, that he is the indigenous population of this island. Sure, his mother was a witch, but that could also be a human. Prospero's a wizard and he's a human. So like, I really think that, whenever these productions lean too much into the fishiness, the monstrousness, the mooncalfness in their costume designs for Caliban, they're playing into the colonial logic of the text in that way, that, oh, we've never seen a human who looks like this before, whether he's black or just some kind of indigenous islander. Like, that is enough othering for characters like Stefano and Trinculo to be baffled at the sight of him, and for someone like Prospero to think they have domain over him, as has historically been the case with people who are not white. And like, this play is about colonialism. It is about a white man showing up on an island and making himself king of it and enslaving the population. So I really just don't like seeing these dehumanizing Caliban costumes. And something that like this production did interestingly, I I still need to mull over if I like it or not. But there's all these other, I will say, the other Calibans who are kind of like our stagehands in the periphery. These like other people who non-speaking roles, but they're kind of like the spirits of the island who have like near identical costumes to Dion's Caliban costume. And on one hand, I feel like that could be making a comment that this is just what the people of this island look like, and it kind of like maybe normalizes it. It doesn't single out Caliban as being just the monster, the singular monster here. But at the same time, it's like, so the indigenous population, plural, almost is its own species, which I kind of take exception to here. And one thing in particular is those like other Calibans, for lack of a better name for them. It's at the end of Act 4 when Stefano and Trinculo are trying on the pretty costumes and they're chased away by, in the text, it is spirits in the shape of dogs and hounds is what chases them away. And in this production, it was just the other Calibans chasing them away. So I'm just like, so do you see them as dogs and hounds, like these other people who make up this indigenous population, or just they don't have to become these like malevolent spirits to chase them away in like dog hunting shapes, but it's just like, oh no, these islanders are chasing us, run. And like it really just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And something that I think I would love to see, and like as much as I say that like Plummer's version of Prospero is the one I picture in my head while I read, and that's true, but I would love to see, and I'm sure someone has done it somewhere, but a version of Prospero that is just truly monstrous, who's just like a raving madman who has no sympathy for anyone. And then Caliban, and partly Ariel too, would become the hero of the show that like, and like that would really like put a big spotlight on the colonial logic underpinning this whole play. But I know it's very rare to see a production like that because Prospero is this like prestige role for gracefully aging actors to kind of usually as a swan song farewell to the stage. So, but then again, that's basically what King Lear is. Like it is another one of these like swan song larger than life older male actor roles. But he gets to be the madness is baked into that play more so than it is in the Tempest. And like something I think I said way back in episode 1 in our King Lear panel is Lear doesn't get to age gracefully. Actors who play Lear do. Because, and I think that could be the same with Prospero, but it's just because he has this like paternalistic wisdom, we shy away from that. And costumes like the Caliban costume that we see in this production, and even as recent as 2018, aren't helping kind of the pendulum of history move forward and recognizing that this character isn't a monster. So that's my Caliban costume rant, which I would have mentioned for my least favorite production element, but I knew we were going to get to it here. Yes. As far as, I like Ariel's costume. Ariel looks great. I like the blue, the airiness, the fade. She looks like she belongs to the air. Well done on that. Someone else say something.
Ed.
Yeah, I agree with Ryan. At the end of the day, I agree that Caliban should be a more humanized character. A part of me does feel like a part of the decision that he was made a fish man was because of the color of his skin. Like, I mean, a lot of black actors I've seen play Caliban, that role. But I mean, I never like to get too political into Shakespeare, and I've heard and have studied the interpretations of it being like this colonialist allegory between Prospero and Caliban. But until I saw the end of this performance, when Prospero says, he's my, this darkness is basically my responsibility, I think the true purpose behind Caliban is that he is Prospero, that is Prospero's shadow, and that if something that would be really interesting to stage, if anyone wanted to take this idea, feel free, something that would be really interesting to stage was if Caliban looked just like Prospero. Whichever actor you cast as Prospero, have it, exactly. I mean, and and because I mean that ending was just so, like, when he claimed Caliban as his own, it's like that was huge. Is like I think that was bigger than all of the uh, uh, I guess, like, rectifications that he's made in that last 15 minutes or so. Like it was, I thought that was very powerful, and I thought that gave way more credence to Caliban being there, and yeah. So I mean, I think I agree with Ryan 100%. I think the Calibans should be more humanized in their costuming, even if he didn't look like Prospero or wasn't portrayed as Prospero's shadow. Caliban is, I think, is supposed to be that sort of humanized being. So the costuming choices were very unique in comparison. I did like the fish version more so than the 2008 version or 2018 version.
The seashell version.
Yeah, the seashell version. I did like the fish costume a bit better, but I think that was just more so because it was a lot more flashy. It was something I hadn't seen before. I think for both it could have been changed.
Yeah, Jill.
Yeah, so I'm probably going to touch on both Ryan and Ed's points a little bit too. This question, sorry, I felt like I was writing a mini compare and contrast essay between the two, because as I kind of started mulling over my own thoughts, I kind of wanted there to be like a hybrid of like an Ariel and a Caliban from each one kind of coming together. So I realized that with this 2010 version, both our Ariel and Caliban were very mystical. Like they were, like, even our Ariel was like quite pixie-esque. She was like a wave. She was the apparition, like Ryan was saying, like she was like the air. And then Caliban too, like actually a fish. And it's funny because if you were to go into like the technicalities of their costumes, both actors were wearing a bodysuit. So like when you wear a bodysuit, that becomes your skin. That becomes like, there's no telling, there really isn't any layers. Like that is your organic layer. And I noticed that, but it was like, okay, like that they are like set in stone as these beings, these creatures, because in a sense, like they both sort of had their actor skin stripped from them and were donning like a creature-esque skin tight thing. Whereas in the 2018 version, both our Ariel and our Caliban, the human actor was still underneath. And this is talking directly to Michael Blake's Caliban costume. It's almost as if the fish was like an armor that he didn't want to wear. Like as the viewer, we saw that as a vest that he is wearing with seashells on it, but his arms were his arms. And to me it was like interesting because in that production both Ariel and Caliban seemed more humanized by this slight change of costume, because the costumes were literally just donned on them. They didn't become them. Whereas the 2010, like there's no room to see that these are humans. Like they've literally been painted upon. It's gone, right? And so in talking to the second part of the question, Mac, of like what did these interpretations sort of bring new insights to these characters? It was very fascinating thinking of both these productions, same text, same characters, but very different scopes. Like the 2018, very much so, like these are human servants, whether they be, I love Ed's tangent on like they could both, I think both Ariel and Caliban can lend themselves to be tangents of Prospero. I think that would be
triplets.
Lovely. Sure, there it is. Actually, no triplets that could probably play this.
Old man on the stage.
Yeah, but and again, it could be that same sort of swan song King Lear-esque thing where it's like there's facets of Prospero that are splayed around the stage, like we have with King Lear's mind, right? And so that was interesting in that production. And then with 2010, like I said, like those characters were operating, they were sort of the facilitators of or the side tangents of the magic or of the mystical. And in a way, yeah, like I agree with Ryan. Like I want both of them to be more humanized. I think there is room for Ariel to sort of be this airy apparition. I also think there's power in that, especially if our Ariel is cast as non-binary or female. I think that gives like a power element to that character. But I think that sorry, I lost my train of thought really quickly. Oh, right. I want there to be a blend of both, I think. Like, I think Ariel can lend itself to be this magical apparition. It's sort of the bodied version of all the magic that's happening on the stage. And Caliban to be human with these, like, magical creature-esque elements displayed upon him that he never asked for. And I think that adds more depth to these characters, like stripping away the relationship with Prospero aside. It would just add more layers than just having them like both be humanized, both be mystical. Yeah, so that was my big little tiny side lecture.
To jump on that really quick, like I just, as you were speaking, I was like, I think it would be really interesting if Caliban of the two, him and Ariel, if Caliban was the one that was humanized and leave Ariel as this symbol for the elements, for nature, because it almost doesn't make sense for Caliban to be a fish or this amalgamation of the natural setting around him, because Prospero, how much he loves or shows his feelings towards Ariel and how much he's accepted his place on the island, it's almost as if he does have this affinity towards nature and towards the elements. And so if keeping his relationships between those natural elements very intimate and doting, and then having it where this one human character that's his slave and whatnot that he treats like dirt, I think that plays a stronger contrast. And then I also think if it's his daughter would be given more importance, as this is a person that I can't treat like a person, because that's I think it's definitely the daughter would be the teaching, that teaching element for Prospero, of him having to change his ways. Because one thing I kind of think about is like it's not like he wanted to be on that island. He's kind of like a slave to the elements as much as he is a ruler of it. But he's like a ruler of basically nothing, like in comparison to what he had before.
Well, and I think by what you're saying too, Ed, like it plays upon Prospero's weakness, dare I say he has one, or his fear, because if you place like him falling to nature and like having these relationships with the elements and the magic, that's safe for him. But if he has this human, this other challenger, it's forcing him to always be at battle with this, especially if you make it a tangent of himself. Like it's forcing him to be vulnerable with his human side. Like, you know, it's not all magic and roses, Prospero. Like, wake up and deal with the stuff. I was gonna say the S word, but I've already sworn.
You've already used it once.
Yeah. So
I mean, you can take mine. You can take mine back.
It's okay. Stuff will suffice. That adds, because I think we don't see a lot. Like, we see him get disgruntled, but we don't see a big fault in this titular character like we do in some of other Shakespeare's titular characters, and I think you could definitely utilize Caliban to leech that out a bit more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were gonna say Ryan or Matt?
Ryan.
It's past. It's fine.
Okay. I will take team off of Jill's thing because I love this Ariel costume. I think it is so brilliant because it makes her this beautiful, powerful spirit of the island. And I love the detail that went into it. Like, if you look on the bodysuit, it's all blue feathered. Like, the painting of the feathers in it. So it's like that whole thing of air, but yet also you see her at the beginning diving into the water. So it's this blue air and water spirit that kind of moves through the island. And this impish way. I can't see Ariel any other way, to be honest. Like, watching the 2018 production after watching this 2010 production live and then rewatching it again on film years down the road, I just couldn't get Juliana's performance out of my head. She really has become my definitive Ariel, where she has this great, this puckish energy about her, where she has this glee and joy, and the costume just exemplifies it because she glows. She's almost like a Tinkerbell, where she's that glowing energy that just ball of light that comes through the sage.
I do really find it interesting that Shakespeare used Ariel, the name Ariel, because Ariel's an angel of God, like it is
guardian
really,
angel.
And when she has the wings,
yes,
on the back, it's very cool. Sorry,
absolutely, yeah. But then I will say, if it's a choice between the 2018 Caliban costume and the 2010 Caliban costume, I have to go with the 2018 Caliban costume, because Ryan's point from the last panel where he talked about how like it's a native islander, like that's who they are, like that's what this character is, and we've kind of turned them into this creature from the Black Lagoon like figure instead. And it's like, no, like the pain of Caliban and what makes him a much stronger character is when you don't make him into a fish, or you make him into a human, because he has these great monologues about how the island has these songs and waves, and how he understands the island, and yet it's being turned against him by Prospero to twist and pinch him and hurt him. And Ryan brought up this great concept in the last thing that stuck with me too, is that like the fish elements that we see on Caliban could almost be like a curse that Prosperos put on him once Caliban made the move on Miranda.
I thought that's what it was, because I thought when he sent Ariel off to go and find Caliban that he would come back as a person. I thought that's what it was at first.
The problem
I would
with
love
that,
to see that.
like, I think that's like a good interpretation, but the problem with it though is that once Caliban is finally freed at the end, there is not this removal of this like outer crust. Even like Jill very like point well taken about how Michael Blake's did still look more human, even if there was these like embellishments on, we could still see the human underneath. Whereas I wouldn't say the same about Dion's here.
No, you don't.
But I would even say that like, if we're contrasting these two, I agree Michael Blake's does look more human, but in isolation, I still think there's too much of that stuff to even go that far to say this is a humanized Caliban. I think, no, this is another fishy Caliban that's just less so by contrast only.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, and overall, I just think the 2010 costume, it more than just dehumanizes Caliban, it distracts Caliban, because I remember watching this production in 2010 as I forget how old I was. 2010, I would have been 14, 15, somewhere around there. Yeah, 14, 15 years old. And I mean, everybody at Stratford Festival was really blown away by this costume, because you got the picture program that showed Dion in his full outfit, and you were just watching the costume because you were just so transfixed by it that you totally missed all these great other things that he's talking about, where he's like, you taught me language, you taught me this, you taught me that, and yet here I am serving you in servitude. Like, you miss all that because you're just so done in by the costume. The costume is so overwhelming that, at least with the Michael Blake version, it's a little bit less overwhelming, because you're more just like, okay, he's got a fish arm, really. That's his main bit that makes him a fishy man. But overall, like, you get a little more of that humanity. So yeah, I would say. The one thing,
I was sorry, just like a little bit with the 2010 bodysuit options for Ariel and Caliban. Maybe this is just because my brain is tailored to like the early 2000s. I saw Caliban and I was like, why is he dressed like a Nerf gun? Like, it seemed, sorry, but like the color patterns they chose for both bodysuits, like arguably Ariel's too, like it seemed like too very on par with 2010, like, look at our brights. Like, bright bodysuits were definitely a thing during that time, 100%.
Yes,
and I get that. Like, play towards, like, grab your audience, make it interesting. I just liked the, like, more organic approach to, like, I guess Ariel aside, but Caliban's costume in 2018, like, it was like a crust. It was like the earth. It was more like the muted, earthy tones, groundedness that I think Caliban has a little bit more than Prospero throughout. Whereas, like, Dion's costume was cool and it was captivating, but I was like, why is this like this bright, vibrant fit? Like, why the color palette, you know? Like, I was never able to just like sit back and be like, why was it this bright orange versus bright green? Like, what?
Yeah, exactly. I think
it seemed a bit more spectacle-y. That again was like, okay, now 100% he's not humanized at all, because like we've not only made him a full fish man, we've now made him like Nerf 2010, 2000. Look at this new fun fish person Nerf gun thing. I don't know why I just keep thinking of that color pattern.
I agree with you, Jillian. Like with
like at least
Caliban,
make
the
him look more
costume,
fishy. Like he was like this chameleon.
or
Sorry,
one color.
the more we're talking about it and breaking it down, it's just it was cool, but I'm like, is that why we should be paying attention to Caliban? Because his costume is cool? No, that is not, right?
I don't think the costume was utilized to the best of its abilities. I mean, that's such a very that's a, one the bodysuit, the colors chosen are a very strong choice because it's very popping on the stage. And then but the fact that it's halved, that there's two sides, there's this green versus orange, and I don't think in terms of the performance that whatever two sides were in the character, that it wasn't played, whether there was a love for Prospero versus a hate for Prospero. Then again, you'd have to play with that costume where, okay, whenever he's hating Prospero, he's turned to the right, and whenever he's loving him, he's turned
and
to
it's
the
like,
left.
is the green, like, is there envy? Like, and then I'm like trying to, like, what's the comparison between the color green and orange? Like, is this envy and like a warmth? But I'm like,
there's
and
no
then
duality.
you get into the eyes as well, right? And again, we have this more scoped version of seeing it. So again, sorry, Des McAnuff, but we're able to scrutinize quite literally up in our face. Like, you can now get into his eye coloring too. Like, what the purpose is just, this is like a really cool costume and it's a spectacle. And I think
there may have been a noble intent towards it. Maybe there was an idea that was hatched, but I don't think it was executed.
Right. And just the more we talk about like how important it is to humanize Caliban, I think that costume is a bit of a disservice to the character of it. Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. Yeah. All right. Final question of the production. So, in our previous episode about the Tempest, we mentioned how Ancient Cimolino's version leaned more on the comedic aspects of this play. Does this production by Des McAnuff also lean on the comedy, or do we find this a more dramatic and darker interpretation of the play? Ed, you can kick this one off.
I think the places where there was comedy in this performance was good. I think there was good intention there. I just don't think at times the comedy landed, like in particular that one scene where Antonio is going back and forth with his comrade
Sebastian.
Sebastian during one of the speeches, like just kind of always interrupting, and that had a plateau. I find that the comedic moments plateau a good bit in this production. So I don't think the Tempest should be an overly comedic piece like in the 2018, or like I guess should lean so heavily into the comedic piece like the 2018. But I'm almost like impartial towards it the more I talk about it. But yeah, so that's my take on it.
Jill?
Yeah, I think this, the thing I really liked about the 2010 version was that it was more instinctually comedic versus it being prescribed. I think a lot of like the approach to the 2018 one was like, okay, this moment is funny, let's be funny. And again, knowing the outside background of this, the Tempest was put on the same season as Coriolanus. So that was like more of the more like serious, darker production for a lot of these cast members versus the Tempest. So there were some moments that I'm like, okay, I feel like these guys and gals, they're all working with each other, and this is the production where they can have some fun and like joke around with each other. And it was lovely to watch, but it didn't seem like it was organically coming from the character. Whereas something like Bruce Dow's Trinculo and this, for example, for me was like, I knew like instinctually he was placing the comedy on the stage. It wasn't like this moment is comedic. He's like, I'm making this moment comedic. So again, that might rest a lot in the production too of Anthony Cimolino wanting to make the Tempest a bit funnier. So having to kind of implement that on the actors. Whereas I think the comedy just like gurgled up from our actors in the 2010 version. So similar to Trinculo, and I mentioned Trish's depiction of Miranda too, like her quirkiness and her spunk, like that you could see that was like her choices she was bringing to the table that just like fluttered out into comedy. And then it allowed like the darker moments and the moments that are underscored with this music and the storm elements and Prospero's sort of grandiose speeches to be more to the forefront, and the darker elements really underscore literally the comedy, and it just was woven a bit better together, as opposed to like the episodic comedy we got a lot in the 2018 version.
Ryan?
Yeah, so like, truth be told, I think looking back on that previous panel, I think I was actually one of the ones who was more on board with the comedy than most of the consensus of the group was. So like, I personally don't ding that as like a big point against that production. Honestly, at a lot of times I kind of felt like that was its saving grace. At times that would have been a little lackluster without. Okay, at least it is funny, and like I thought the comedy really landed in most instances in that production. So that said, like, I think this is the better production overall. So, and the fact that it is less funny without abandoning comedy altogether, like, I remember, like, Will, for example, he really took issue with Miranda being very overly comical on the last panel. And, like, seeing Trisha's version of the character here, I kind of just think Miranda's always funny. She just has some great lines, and it's a hard character to not put this comedic spin onto. So, like, retroactively, I'm going to take issue with Will taking issue with trying to remember her name, who played Miranda last time. Was it Mamie Zwettler? Yeah. Like, I thought she was like a fun Miranda. Like, I think, and like, I really like thought her flirting with Ferdinand was like really cute in there, and like she did her funny like trying to lift the log. Whereas in this production, just like, don't even try to lift the log, you silly girl. And that one, she actually did it better than Ferdinand did, and I thought that was funny. Like, there's a lot of. And like, yeah, there was certainly like a natural levity to a lot of this production. Like, just the fact that Plummer was kind of always chuckling and like he was having a good time really created that current, even if there wasn't like overt jokes to a lot of it. That said, there are moments like the one with Gonzalo that I talked about earlier, whereas I thought it was like too much. While I did think, yeah, Graham Abbey and Andre Sills were funny together in their dynamic there, I think it like came at the cost of us taking Gonzalo seriously, and this production did a much better job of doing that. Like, that production was, I think, getting too caught up in the fact that the villains are funny and then not treating them as villains.
Briefly interject too, we're all biased, but like in that season, we just saw Graham Abbey as Ophidius and Andre Sills as Coriolanus, or if you're doing a double header, you're going to be like, oh, these are our titular characters from Coriolanus having an Abbott and Costello moment on stage. This is lovely, where it's like, hey, that's not the point, you know? And that's the cost you kind of take by making like those other titular characters have a scene together. Your brain's gonna know, like, you know, you're gonna have that. It's gonna steal away from
Just kind of one last point on comedy that I have here, though, is ironically there's one character who I felt could have been a little funnier to my taste, and that was Gruntwyn Davies as Stefano, which, because truth be told, like, even though he paired with Trinculo, they are the clowns of this, there were two moments in particular where I just thought, man, this is getting kind of too dark for Stefano. And like, I think it works interpretation, like dramaturgically, but at the same time, I'm just like, this is the kind of funny clownish side plot, and like that got dark just in the line delivery. And there were two of them in particular. It was the first one is the moment when Stefano promises to Caliban that he will kill Prospero and marry, or, you know, basically rape Miranda and take her as his queen. Like, that line was delivered very darkly, and I think, that makes sense given the subject matter. Is like, I'm going to kill this man and take his daughter as my concubine. Like, yes, that, and like, that is a moment where we should maybe going, okay, man, Stefano means business and could be a legitimate threat. So I don't really take issue with that, even like, wow, that's a turn for our comical character. But the one that I kind of thought didn't do it for me was then later on when Trinculo takes out the big cloak and he's wearing it, and Stefano says to him, and I wrote down the quote because of course I did, he says, "Put off that gown, Trinculo. By this hand I'll have that gown." And he said it like so sternly that he missed the joke of that line. It's the contrast of the serious, take that off because I want it. But he was like so harsh to Bruce, like in that moment that like there was some light laughter from the audience who I think like me realized that the line was supposed to be a joke, but it was not delivered as one. It was just like take that off, I'm the king. So yeah, while I do think overall the fact that there was like some comedy but overall quite serious production worked just fine. I can even point to moments that I think could have been a little funnier. So yeah, I can go both ways on this one.
For me, I absolutely say this production most certainly leans more on the dramatic end of the scale, with that dramatic cinematic underscore that was played throughout the entire production. This Prospero and this Prospero and Ariel departure at the end felt a lot more tragic and sad. Like, I was really sad to see the two of them separate, where Ariel gets in the boat and floats off, and like you really felt this breakup that was happening on stage.
Because like I said at the beginning, it seemed like they were like legitimately friends, which is kind of rare in that dynamic. So like, I agree.
Yeah,
with that.
Exactly.
Go on.
And then on top of that, like, although the scenes didn't work perfectly, I did feel there was more danger in the Timothy, Sticknicky, Sebastian, and John Vickery's Antonio scenes. Like in that assassination thing, there was that bigger sense of danger to them that I didn't feel that the 2018 production had. And Prospero's anger and vengeful drive that drives his character throughout much of the show really made it a much more dramatic performance, with Plummer when he intended a line to be funny, like during the Maidenhead banter that he does. That is funny. Or when he does a little sounds he makes or things to call Ariel. Like those little tiny moments where he does have funny quips. Those were clearly intended to be funny, and he hit those marks really well. But overall, like the weight and the dramatic drive of this play really was much more prevalent in this production than I would say in the 2018. 2018 was much more lighter and had some more comedical washes put on it. This one felt very dramatic, and then intended comedy came through, which is why, once again, I think the Trinculo Stefano first scene right off the top really hit it out of the park, because it had that quick, funny comedy that played forward for them. But yeah, overall, I really think this was a much more dramatic interpretation. And I mean, just looking at that season in general, I mean, you had Two Gentlemen of Verona and The Winter's Tale as the two other like Shakespeare. So I think if you're going to rank them as like dramatic stories, you could go Tempest, Winter's Tale, Two Gentlemen. So
yeah,
I can totally see why this one maybe did lean more on the dramatic end of the spectrum.
Two romances in the same year. That's kind of interesting. Like, haven't we had enough shipwrecks?
There also was As You Like It. As You Like It was also in that season too. There were four. That was the fourth other. Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, because the great Brett Carver starred as Jacques in that production.
Right.
R.I.P.
Yes, indeed. Overall, though, fantastic panel, everybody. We have a lot more coming your way in the very near future with more reviews. So don't think this series is over just because we're kind of winding down on the Stratford end of things. There is a plethora of things to do and talk about, because art is ever going. Like, there's so much goodies to take from right now. So yeah, stay tuned for more. September 9th, Man of Destiny coming out, featuring Ed as Napoleon and myself as Lieutenant. So stay tuned for that. We have some great interviews with Ryan and a number of artists from the theater community that will be coming out. And coming out towards the end of September, we will have our first roundtable discussion, which will be about Shakespeare and gender. So there'll be a lot of great discussions to be had there. So all that great stuff. In the meantime, though, Ed, where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you?
You can find me at Edmund Clark Official on Instagram. I think Edmund_Clark_ official. And yeah, if you have any questions or anything like that, or if you just want to keep up with what I'm doing, just follow me on there.
Yes. Perfect. Jill, where can people find you?
Yes, people can find me at my artist Instagram account, jillian.robinson96. Similar to Ed, if you want to see what I'm up to, post some singing covers, see what's what's coming down the pipeline, feel free to follow. Like Mac was saying, I also had the privilege of stage managing Man of Destiny and working with the two of them alongside our lovely cast. So I'm excited for that to go out.
Ryan, give us your classic sign off.
Yeah. Well, end this whole Stratford series the same way that we started it, with me saying you can't find me on social media. Good luck trying. Just
Martha Henry will find you, Ryan.
I was in her corner.
No, come check out Man of Destiny so you can come and critique us.
Yeah. But yes, if anyone is interested in what I do, literally everything I post on Facebook is just sharing Cup of Hemlock stuff anyway, so you're better off just following Cup of Hemlock, send the love that way, like, share, and subscribe this video. And yeah, it's fun stuff. This has been so fun, this whole Stratford
Also, fun
series.
magical fact, my drink is actually empty, but look, it looks fully full because of the frozen mug that is now.
Magic is real.
Magic. Yeah. And you can find me.
Go ahead.
Oh no, Brian, you go.
No, I just wanted to kind of, as a sign-off, say that just talking about all these Stratford productions has been so fun. And even though we will continue reviewing other content, this has been great. And what a kind of great note to, break our staff and drown our book on to end with a revisiting of the Tempest. Yes. So thank you, Stratford.
Wow.
Thank you, Stratford. Indeed, you've given us some
so
quality
much, Stratford,
content to discuss.
Yeah, you kept us entertained for this whole quarantine summer. Like, we watched the production every single week.
You contributed to theater staying alive.
Yes.
Anthony Cicilline and the rest of the team of Stratford, thank you for providing us with this quality content.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to David Collins and Bridget and all our guests who have come on and joined us for this series, because you've all brought wonderful, unique perspectives and voices and stories to these panels. I've made them really a treat to host and watch. So thank you.
We raise our cup to you.
Indeed, we do. Cups to you, dears.
Cheers.
But yeah, overall, once again, thank you, everybody. You can find me at Mackenzie Horner on all social media platforms, as well as at Before the Downbeat with Autumn. Our Sweeney Todd episode's coming out this Friday. So if you like some meat pies and demon barbers, and also we actually do talk about Shakespeare in that episode, because it has ties to Titus Andronicus. So there you go.
Nice.
Overall, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Stratford, and we will see you all with our next review coming a little bit later on in September. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.